Hi, this is Dan Harris, and welcome back to the Ironbird podcast. We are live from the MBAA event here in Las Vegas. We are supported by Flyhouse. Today's conversation is about what safety really means in aviation. Not just flight decks and SOPs, but maintenance, leaderships, and systems that all fit together. Today I'm joined by Mann from Flyhouse, Rob Cox from Sunair, and Michael Parrish from Elliott Aviation. Between them, we're covering everything from small fleet challenges to large-scale MRO operations. Everyone, I appreciate you guys coming on with me. Al, I'll start with you because we're going to start with safety. How would you define safety within your organization as a 135 operator?
Well, for us, it's always been a whole enterprise management system. You and I have talked about this before, where I like to take safety out of safety management system. So it's a whole enterprise management system that allows us to assess risk and make risk-based decisions that incorporates all areas and all departments.
Yeah. For you, Michael, on the MRO side, you're working on the airplanes, not flying them. Right. How does that change your perspective when it comes to aviation safety? Like, what is aviation safety? How's that defined for you?
It's got to be part of your culture. It's we took a very solid approach late last year going into this year that our entire business model is focused on 5 key objectives, and the first one is safety.
Yeah.
So it mirrors safety, quality, et cetera. But it's got to be ingrained as a day-to-day action. There's got to be a mindset of it's not a gotcha, it's a follow-on.
Yeah.
It's almost a brotherhood where you've got oversight, you've got confidence in the people that are beside you, and it starts from the ground crew all the way through to that last final QC inspector. So,
Rob, what about you? You're almost kind of in between Al and Michael, where you're on a 135 certificate, but you also have a 145. So how do you define safety within your position?
Yeah, I really do have to bridge both gaps there. And I like to tell my guys that safety starts at the toolbox. We start safety at the hangar level, at the smallest point and build up there. And it's definitely a cultural thing. And you got to get the mechanics to buy in at a very low level. Mechanics inherently are a little standoffish when it comes to this stuff like this. They kind of want to fix the airplane and stay to themselves and not necessarily get involved in that sort of thing, or safety tickets or whatever. So getting their buy-in is key. And once you get their buy-in and you build that culture, and then it becomes easy. And once you get the ball rolling, all of a sudden, and it is a safe space for them to report issues, and they know there's no backlash or anything like that, then it really becomes easier as you go on. And then tying that in with the ops side, our ops and our maintenance departments are extremely close and extremely tied together when it comes to SMS and safety in general. So we bought into safety a long time ago, and we've been building it throughout the years with all of our safety ratings and audit standards and stuff like that. So it's become, I don't want to say second nature to us, but it's definitely part of our culture.
I think everyone talks about culture safety.
right.
But how do you put it into practice?
It's when you get to a major MRO, when you establish the procedures and the guidelines and the policies, I mean, there are formats and things that you have to follow. I mean, we've got maintenance manuals, we've got procedures, we've got safety committees and standards, but it comes down to best practice. You can get complacent very easy.
Yeah.
A lot of shops, we happen to be Garmin's largest install dealer, so we do a lot of repetitious work. To me, that's when some of the complacency can come in. You've just been doing it over and over and over. But it's just having that fortitude and wherewithal to kind of step back and ensure best practice before you button up a panel. Holding people accountable, just following protocol, and not being in a hurry.
Yeah.
In today's fast-paced world, time is money, but it's okay to kind of step back and take one more look at something.
Yeah. Al, we talk a lot about safety from a pilot standpoint, but what do you think is missed when people only talk about pilot and not are talking about maintenance from a safety standpoint?
Yeah, you could argue you miss 50% of the input, 50% of the improvement that you can accomplish. You're missing a massive part. I'm not telling you guys on the maintenance side, I'm not every day in the maintenance side, that it is much more difficult, has been much more difficult to get the guys on the shop floor to buy into that. And you can't Dan, you just mentioned my favorite word is culture.
Yeah.
You can't demand that. You can demand it to a degree, but it's very nuanced.
Yeah.
That everybody within the company, and if I'm going to go back to my very first answer, a management system that is company-wide, and it must be company-wide, because if you miss out certain aspects or certain departments within the company, you've basically lost.
Yeah.
You've lost. So yes, the pilot side of the house has been doing this for quite a while. Maintenance, I think we're getting to the point now where the more mature operators have crossed that hurdle, but we still have some work to do.
Yeah.
But it must be driven from the top down. And if you do that, you're one group and not just several groups within the organization.
Rob, how do you think people go from having safety as, a placard on their wall versus, getting it to the daily conversation? Not just like, all right, we got to get the work done, but how do you bring safety into that daily conversation to make it kind of a part of the culture?
Yeah, well, we started having much more frequent safety talks and safety meetings and trainings. You start off doing a once a year, you have an SMS training, or you have a certain training events that the technicians have, and then they finish it and they put that on the shelf and they forget about it for about a year. So we found that by having these monthly safety briefings and safety meetings, and then when there is something that happens, or there is an SMS report, maintenance related or even company related, we'll have a little meeting about it. My department's small enough to where I can powwow everybody together and sort of talk about it. So it's constantly on the front of their mind. It's something that we're not talking about every 6 months or a year, but we're talking about it every couple of weeks. Safety, the term SMS comes up. It wasn't that long ago that you probably could pull mechanics and use the term SMS, and very few would even know what that was. That's an ops thing. It's a pilot thing. That's a 135 world or something like that. But so we really, I mean, we have, like you said, we have the posters all over my department, and the QR codes so they can do their own reporting and do their own tickets and stuff like that. Everybody's got access to that, but we talk about it a lot. We have a safety month, which happens to be November at my company, where we do an entire month of safety stuff. We also do our training that month. We have multiple meetings, and just every day there's new stuff coming out, and newsletters and that sort of thing like that. And then we just sort of carry that on throughout the rest of the year. And we quarterly newsletters in our company, and so there's always a big safety brief in that. So it's just something you're just kind of constantly sort of peppering them in and reminding them that it's there, and reminding them of the policies, and doing the training, and it's they've really taken to it. Like in the beginning, it was tough. Mechanics are creatures of habit, but once you get over the hump, they've really taken a hold of it.
This episode is brought to you by Charter Flight Support, the only coverage in private aviation that protects you when an aircraft mechanical issue stops your aircraft from flying. CFS not only provides financial support if the replacement aircraft costs more, they also help locate and book quality backup aircraft fast. Learn more at charterflightsupport.com, and don't forget to sign up for their newsletter, The Fix, for real-time insights on private jet trends, aircraft types, and rates. Michael, how do you I don't want to say create a safe space for people to report issues, but how do you get from people that are normally guarded, right, and don't want to say a mistake or into a position that they're much more open into sharing that information?
I think you brought up a very good point. When you make it public, we try really hard to do similar processes and practices, which are, letting the company know when mistakes are going to happen. Incidents happen. Usually they're minor, and you share that with the company. You share it with the other facilities. You practice best practice. You have safety stand-downs. Safety's a buzzword that gets thrown out there a lot, and it's very easy to revert back to, and we're focused on it. But what you mentioned was very true to the core. When you build we go back to culture. When you build a culture that people are comfortable and confident enough to report things, a lot of times they don't have to report it. They kind of self-report with their partner that's actually doing it. And that's the culture that we're trying to breed, they don't have to go around me to go to somebody else. They can just go to you, and you're comfortable enough to say, hey, Bill, are you sure you checked that? Before you button that up, does that look right? It's one little step.
Yeah, I think follow-up after the reports have gone in, following back up with the people that did the reports, or as like I said, my group is small enough as a group as a whole, knowing that, one, the report was seen, it was read, it was dealt with. Here's what we did as a company. Here's what we did with it. Your voices were heard.
Yeah.
And for the guys that are a little bit afraid of the outcome, if they are, ratting something out, that there's no punishment there. There's no outcome there. So, and we do have an anonymous feature to our reporting if they do choose to do anonymous. Most don't. We don't get a lot of anonymous reports. Very few. Most of them, I would say, 20% are anonymous. Most of them, they do put their names on, which is great. But for the guys and gals that do fear something, they could do it anonymously. But I think coming back after the fact and saying, hey, even if it's just a one-on-one, and saying, hey, we did see your report. This is what we did about it. Or if they see it, they see a new tooling, or they see a new feature in the hangar.
That follow-up.
The follow-up from a report. Then
it is.
Then they know, okay, somebody at the top or somebody
people actually care about this stuff and actually do it.
Yeah.
Now, for maybe smaller operators that don't have a safety position like your own, what are you telling them, or what are you telling their director of maintenance? They're almost more important now from a safety culture if they don't have these positions. Like, what guidance are you telling maybe the smaller operators to help build that safety culture?
Act like a big operator. So, regulations they don't change very often, but one of the biggest things right now, on our collective horizon is Part 5 and the SMS requirements. So you got to start now. And it doesn't matter whether you're 1, 2, 3, or 30, 40, 50 airplanes.
Yeah.
Act, think, and come to the table with this mentality of a larger operation. And you will find ways to make things happen. You will find ways to increase your policies, procedures, make them better, bring people in. The key, though, the bottom line is that everybody has safety in their title, right? It might not be on the business card, but everybody has that. The 119s have the ability to initiate or cancel a flight, but everybody has the ability to do the canceling part of the flight if they see something. So it's just engaging people within that mindset and culture again of you are a safety evangelist, regardless of if you're in leadership or on the shop floor. It doesn't matter.
I think he brings up a good point. It's actually part of our review cycle for people that have nothing to do with the shop floor. I mean, there's an element of safety, and this is for finance people, human resources, and they look at it and they wonder, how can I impact safety? Well, it's like, you've got to walk through the shop floors, you've got to execute, so safety glass, just the repetition. This is when mistakes happen, when you become complacent and the person from HR walks from one shop to the other and something happens or something falls or something drips. So it's just that regimented practice.
Even on the charter side, when we would look at charter flights that were coming off of maintenance events, or we'd say, hey, can we move this maintenance event? And say, this is a big flight. Get this thing moved, right? You're like, I don't know if we can, or they really need this, or they don't have any hours. As a younger charter salesperson, I would push, right? Hey, we really need to get this done. I really want this airplane. Or at the end of a maintenance cycle, hey, how fast can we get this airplane back up and running, right? So it's like, there is other parts of safety in every other department that I think when you have that culture of safety, it will help in the long run. Maybe that airplane doesn't do that specific flight, but in the long run, it's going to pay dividends when they were in the right airplane, or you didn't rush to get an airplane back to service, or you didn't move that airplane, you didn't MEL that thing that really needed to get done, or was in a grace month and you didn't push that grace month to the absolute limit just to get one more flight in or one more revenue in. I think in the long run, that usually pays off. Another thing that I'm really interested in getting your perspectives is doing in-house maintenance and going to a bigger 145 shop. And Rob, you've got a little experience with both. When you are looking at maintenance events, how do you talk to airplane owners about what to decide to do in-house versus what we should bring to a larger maintenance facility?
Well, from a value standpoint to our clients, it's a great value to do the maintenance in-house. We offer substantial discounts for that. That's part of our charm, I guess you could say.
Yeah. By
doing as much as possible to where our comfort level, anyways. There are certain maintenance events we don't do in-house. It's a case-by-case, airplane-by-airplane judgment call, that I'll make. We don't do any paint or interior or installs. So that right there is a big driving factor. And a lot of times you'll marry a paint, interior, and install with a larger maintenance event.
Yeah.
So that will kind of drive that decision. But as far as the maintenance we do choose to do in-house, some of the larger events, a 96-month or a 48-month or something like that, depending on the airplane like that, for me, it's a risk analysis. It's do we have the people to do it? Do we have the equipment to do it? Do we have the experience to do it? Can we do it without risking the rest of the fleet, the timing and all that sort of stuff like that? And I've been able to somewhat manipulate my fleet to where I don't have major projects overlapping each other, and been very successful at that. And I do like to keep a lot of stuff in-house as much as I can. I feel it's great for our clients. I like to keep my eyes on my airplanes. I'm a little greedy when it comes to that sort of thing. But I do have a relationship with some great MROs that I do use on a regular basis for some of the bigger stuff like that. And we have a whole vetting process for that, a vendor approval process. We go through that, and part of that is SMS, and part of that is their training and all that stuff like that goes hand in hand with all of it. So,
what if for smaller operators that maybe don't have a full 145, they've got 2 airplanes, 1 mechanic that does everything for them? What would you advise them to say, all right, here's the decision-making process I would take as a smaller maintenance professional of telling my owners, hey, here's what we should be doing in-house versus going to a larger shop? Because I'm assuming if you're employing as a maintenance tech, you don't want to tell your owner no, right? But if you're not comfortable, or if you think it'd be done elsewhere, like how would you analyze that from a smaller operator standpoint?
Yeah, if I was a smaller operator, and I have been a smaller operator in the past and didn't have the MRO or technicians, it's relationship building. Go out and find the MROs that you like, or the one that fits your needs, that's scalable to what you need, and build that relationship and get that one-on-one relationship with a guy like this, and his team, and know his team, and know their systems, and know their culture. And then when you get comfortable with their work, and go back. And I feel that constant, that go back, and that always, that, like I said, that relationship back and forth with the same. I tend to do business with the same MRO over and over again like that. And over time, they learn your system, you learn their system. The in and out is a lot easier. And you know what to expect, and they know what to expect from you. And there's a comfort level there. And so I would say vet them, do your vetting, do your due diligence, find somebody you're comfortable with, and then build a relationship with them.
Michael, for you, as a larger maintenance facility, how do you build those relationships with different operators of different sizes?
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, he touched on a lot of the key highlights, which are you've got to have the relationship. I very much in alignment with what he stated as far as, if I were an operator, I'd say definitely align yourself with 1 to 3 solid MROs, because you're not always going to be able to plan and get into the right slot. So have a short Rolodex of people that you can trust and rely on. And for us, it's a very boutique style MRO service, so that we can deal with that individual. We deal with a lot of independent owners, operators, as well as some pretty high volume fleet operations. And it comes down to communication. It's setting the expectation up front. It's planning. In today's materials world, where parts and things are having issues, it's planning. It's communication. An MRO of any kind of magnitude is going to carry the authorizations, the certifications, the tooling. To kind of circle back to some of your questions regarding a smaller shop or maybe 2 mechanics for an owner, you've got to look at your assessment and look at your capabilities internally. Yes, you may have 2 mechanics that are capable of performing an inspection, but do you have the right equipment? Do you have the right test? Do you have the capability to bring in NDT or inspectors or things like that? Those are the things that often get overlooked, that can drag out a downtime or delay that people don't account for. And that's the repetition of a major MRO or somebody that's got a 145 internally. Yeah. You just know it's tried and true.
Yeah, so. And some of that time you bring that work in-house to save money, but if you've got issues that you can't maybe perform, now your downtime, it flips on the other side.
Correct.
Maybe from your perspective, Michael, what questions would you have owner operators or other companies, would you tell them these are the questions you should be asking MROs to get more comfortable with their work or their relationship that I want to build with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've asked I've been asked this many a time, and I have the same response. I ask them point blank. I say, "What are you experts at?"
Yeah.
And the red flag for me is when somebody's an expert at everything.
Yeah.
That's number one. We're a really solid MRO, and there's a lot of them around this facility today.
Yeah.
But you can't be an expert at everything. Hone in on what you're really good at, and focus on that. I've talked to multiple operators that have a pretty divisive fleet. And they're going over here saying they're the experts at Falcon and they're experts at Challenger and they're expert. Sooner or later, it's like I'm a firm believer that you can't be an expert at everything. So that's question one for me.
Yeah.
And if somebody's claiming to be the industry leader in everything, I would caution. I'd just sit back and do a little more diligence.
This episode is brought to you by Video Valet. If you care about having the best in-flight experience on your private flights, Video Valet offers up to 1.2 million movies, shows, magazines, and newspapers, all available on board without the need of expensive Wi-Fi or hardware. Eric and his team at Video Valet deliver fully customized iPads to ensure that your preferences are met on every single flight. Whether providing my kids with their favorite shows or allowing me and my wife to catch up on breaking news, I personally could never travel without it again. Video Valet is offering a special promotion to Ironbird podcast listeners. Mention Ironbird, and Video Valet will add one free fully personalized iPad at no additional cost. Now, to the Ironbird podcast. Now, when we're looking at building an ecosystem of safety, maintenance is obviously part of that. And as you're going to other MROs and other safety and other maintenance shops, how do you integrate your own safety ideas when you're going to someone else's company?
Well, again, we've mentioned this culture word several times today. You have a culture, and I agree, Michael, what you just said about as an auditor. 90% of my life is trying to figure out who these people are, whether it's an MRO, whether it's an aircraft operator, whoever, whatever. It doesn't take too long on the ground to figure out where their truth lies.
Yeah.
And I think that if you can marry your culture with their culture, yes, you've got to have certain capabilities and standards in place and all the things that you would go in your typical 135, 145 audit.
Yeah.
That for me is the key. How do people relate to you? I think that the most successful businesses in our industry are the ones that click, the ones that have the relationship. Now, there are times when you've just got to get an airplane fixed, and it's time critical. But if you take the long view, like the small operator,
Yep.
you can always take time to sit down and assess someone properly, or take time to come up with a process or a vendor audit, because it does work out in the long run. And if we take that long-term relationship and as our number one goal, that's always going to be, in my opinion, that's always going to help you and benefit you, again, in the long run.
Yeah.
So again, it's a cultural fit.
Yeah, that makes sense. For smaller to medium-sized operators, Robin, I'm kind of throwing this one at you. When they look at having an in-house team that does maintenance, but they maybe want to move to become a 145 shop, what do you think is that benefit for them moving just from doing maintenance to becoming an actual 145?
Well, right off the bat, it's the oversight. It's the FAA oversight. It's the structure. It's what the 145 forces you to become, the skeleton of it, and all the policies and procedures you may not have had as just a group of mechanics maintaining a group of airplanes. And then from there, and then reach out to some of the audit standards and go from there. There's nothing says that a small MRO can't go get independently audited by any one of the audit standards. If you are, Center Jets on the 135 side has every audit standard you can name. Yeah. To the nth degree, but so does the 145. So my 145 gets audited at the same time my 135 does as well, which is something we're very proud of, and we welcome that. Say open the doors and come audit us. The 145. That's my primary. As a 135, 145, I keep them separate to a certain extent. So the 145 is my primary vendor. So for a small person or a small shop wanting to take that next leap and become a 145 and maintain their in-house fleet, that's the way we started. We maintain our in-house fleet only, primary. About 90% of the work we do is for our own fleet only. Yeah. So that's where we started, and we built it from there. We'll do occasional outside work, third-party work, but we focus on our inside, ourselves. And then, we treat ourselves like the 135 with all the audit standards.
Yeah. Michael, do you think there's a fleet size where it starts to make sense to look at becoming a 145 versus not?
I think you need to be at least 5, before it financially starts to make sense, and then it can go up from there. But there's a lot of things that people don't take into account. I think in your situation, it absolutely makes sense. I'm a firm believer in the continuity. I look at the pilot side of the house, as opposed to contract pilots having the same crew. There's a lot of associated costs to maintain that year over year. And new owners getting into the business don't take that into account until after the fact, and it's kind of sticker shock. But, right now I just met with the FAA several weeks ago about some options and some other things, but it's a 2-year wait in some regions just to get the process rolling, to start establishing quality procedure, approvals, and mandates. So it's not something that we can huddle together as a board, come together and say it makes financial sense, let's go do it in 2 months. It's a process. You've got to establish quality manuals. What he's talking about doing was a lot of work, and it's a lot of work to maintain outside of just performing the maintenance itself. Yeah. So some people look at that and they said it's probably easier just to align ourselves with some solid MROs and just let them handle what they're authorized and good at.
Yeah, until they get to some certain size where
Correct.
Say, okay, what are those additional costs when it comes time to creating a 145?
Equipment.
Yeah.
The training, we dedicated to training. We have a dedicated contract with one of the training facilities, and send our technicians to training on a regular basis. I don't know a lot of people who dedicate. Yeah. It's not mandated by the FAA that technicians go to training like it is for pilots. So, but we do focus on training, facility, tooling. All of that is a huge expense. So there's a lot of upfront cost to doing this. And then, in the beginning, we focused on one type of aircraft, and then it was 2 types. And then it was only the types of aircraft, or it still is only the types of aircraft that we operate. So we try to keep it as focused, like you mentioned earlier, keeping it focused, not trying to be experts in everything, limiting in ourselves, throttling back when we have to, and only taking on what we can do. But having our own in-house center as a whole, having our own in-house 145, I feel adds great value, not only to our clients, our aircraft owners, but to our charter customers, to our brokerage customers and stuff like that. So when they want to come in and look at us and vet us as a company, they say, well, who's doing your maintenance? Yeah. It's a 145. Yeah. It's an audited 145. It's not an in-house group of mechanics, which was fine, but it's an audited group of 145. Yeah. So get back to your question about at which point does somebody do that? It's really up to them. 5 airplanes, 10 airplanes, I don't know. I know that it was a 145 when I got to Sun Air, and I think they did it at about 10 airplanes. Yeah. And we've always been above that or well above that ever since.
It's interesting you talk about how it's a advantage having a 145 in the charter standpoint. Al, I would pose this to you. When we're talking about charter and flying with maintenance, what do you think is the risk when that communication between pilots and maintenance is not really strong?
It could cost you money from a regulatory point of view or a compliance point of view, right? So I think that, again, I'm going to sound like a very broken record here. I'm going to come back to culture. Every answer is going to start with culture for me, I'm afraid. But again, if you're separated within an organization, it's pilots versus mechanics versus leadership versus admin staff.
Versus charter versus operations.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there's a little bit of this is healthy, of course, but it just sets yourself up for failure. And I think that, again, my definition of SMS, you get rid of that first S and it becomes a management system. That implies that you've got everybody within the company on the same page. And it's not just, an aviation thing, but communication. I was a Royal Air Force guy, so I was taught day one in the RAF, flexibility is the key to air power. Well, communication is the key to everything that we do here. And if you're not 100% at the top of your game on communication and communicating the right and appropriate things in a timely manner, again, you're setting yourself up for failure in so many areas. And in our business, that can have substantial consequences. If you forget or you are going to write an airplane up at the end of the day, which no one does, right?
Yeah.
That could have a consequence that we just don't want to deal with. We would hate to deal with that. So again, I would encourage everybody to put those processes in place that includes every area within the company. But communication is absolutely key.
How do you structure that better relationship between pilots and the maintenance team so they don't look at squawks just as paperwork and that's someone else's problem?
It's teamship is another word, okay? So if you're all on the same page, if you're all rowing the same direction and you're all communicating an issue, everybody understands what that issue is and the outcome of that, where we are to that outcome, on a timeline, how that affects the business, how it affects the airplane owner, the customer, the charter customer in our case. You just have to spend time.
Yeah.
Again, regardless, you have to spend time figuring out what works for you. And what works for Sun Air Jets may be completely different. What the system that we have at Flyhouse may be completely different for Elliott, but you have to come up with that one way. And again, it's being proactive, isn't it? I mean, so to put this back into the safety bucket, safety is just not, okay, I've got a manual and everybody knows where the manual is, and you sit back. It is a proactive system. You're constantly working on it. I think there's probably not a week goes by where we could, all 4 of us could come up with an example of where communication has broken down within our systems that we then have to work on and tweak. So I used to be, I grew up as a pilot, and I was more than happy to write the airplane up, stick it in the hangar, and say, call me when you're done, and step back, right? Because I'm not a maintenance guy. So there is a balance there. There is a balance between working with your colleagues in the maintenance shop to get the product, the airplane, back online, and just going, well, that has nothing to do with me. You have to communicate and communicate properly. Yeah.
I mean, Michael, for you don't have that direct connection like Rob and Al do to that pilot, to those operations. How do you build that connection from the squawk, from the write-up to working on it?
Yeah, so we deal with a lot of the owners at the tail end, and what they've seen over the last decade is that the downtime is money. So the longer that we delay, it's money out of their pocket. Airplanes they serve a purpose. They generate revenue, and COVID really exacerbated that and the need to have them up in the air. I've seen more and more. I've seen a trend where pilots more and more are obtaining their A&Ps, and they're actually going through the process of getting the maintenance background so that they have a deeper understanding. A generic write-up, an avionics write-up that's vague, that's thrown over the fence, it can create a lot of unwanted troubleshooting, a lot of R&R. It creates additional issues. You can create a hornet's nest that otherwise wasn't there, and it could have been a wow switch or something crazy that just should have been outlined. So we get the luxury of dealing with a lot of repetitive crews. I look at some of the airlines and some of the high turnover, and I look at their processes that they have. Digitalization has really helped. You're no longer looking at a lot of scratch sheets and things and trying to interpret some guy's opinion of what really happened. Use of video for turnover and things like that is something that's becoming a little more prevalent and needs to become more prevalent. I think when you can have a video interpretation of a pilot that says, this is what happened, this is what I felt, and you can turn that over to a shift lead in the morning, they get a little bit better perspective rather than 6 bullet points and a guy that wants to head home after a 10-hour day. Yeah. So it's important.
What do you think a pilot's role is in doing more than just writing it up?
Well, it goes back to what I just said.
Yeah.
if it's vague, it's going to create a lot of unnecessarily cost, risk, exposure, incidents to the airplane. I almost feel there's a responsibility. I lived in the era where I got a lot of stuff turned over. I'm a mechanic by trade. I started out, I hold an A&P, and I dealt with the same issue. I had the guys that it's late at night, they write things up, throw it over the fence, and I'd come in the next morning, there it is, and I'm trying to decipher how this correlates that issue. And it creates probably the first 2 hours are just dissecting it and figuring out how to start troubleshooting. If you can talk to the pilot, or you have something that's more personable, and it says at this altitude, it feels like it's doing this or doing that. It's the human factor.
Yeah.
And it reverts back to the buzzwords that we keep saying here, which are safety, culture, communication. If you really strip it back, that's it. I mean, I had an owner of my business for, it was a family-run business before we converted over to private equity. It was communication, communication, communication. I didn't have a meeting that I didn't sit in with that group that wasn't instilled and ingrained in everything that we do. Set the expectation up front. That goes from the pilots to the maintenance team to the customer, all the way through to invoice. Tell people what you're going to do and then do what you said.
Rob, are you seeing any new tools that's helping that communication structure now? Is it, like the Slacks of the world or Microsoft Teams or any other, do those really help? Or are you seeing any other tools that are kind of maybe closing a tighter loop around that communication?
Yeah, for our pilot reporting system has gone digital a few years ago. So there's no more, quote unquote can in the airplane where the pilot writes it up and just walks away and then only one mechanic sees it, he reads it. So all of our stuff's done digitally now, and the second that pilot writes it up, it goes into our calendar system and our quoting system in the entire charter calendar. The aircraft's grounded as soon as there's a squawk written up. Everybody sees it, from charter to dispatch to everyone in maintenance, and it's on everybody's computer screen, so everybody has a chance to read it. And then I'm lucky enough, or our company's lucky enough to have a really close bond between pilots and maintenance. So I encourage the mechanics or my leads that do get that squawk in the morning or do to get assigned that discrepancy to call the pilot. If they need further details or something like that, and see what it is. But the technology aspect of it is going digital helped us out tremendously. We don't just have this squiggly little, hard to read squawk that's in a can somewhere and not sure what that really means, and then, being delayed while you try to call this pilot and figure out what's going on. So the digital aspect of it, and now we ended up with twice as many squawks, because when the pilot's sitting there with an iPad and he's flying in and he's just, this light's out and this doesn't look right, and it's so easy, much easier for them to report discrepancies, and they're apt to write a lot more things up, which is great in the long run because we're starting to see these things, and then we don't get bombarded with a whole secret napkin list of things when you do go into a large maintenance visit. So the technology aspect of it has made our jobs a lot easier. We get better write-ups, we get them timely, and the pilots are there, and the back and forth digitally. You can turn right around and ask them the question, and they're most of the time they want to help you fix the airplane, so they're willing to do that. They can attach pictures to it. So if they are flying and they do see something, they'll snap a picture of the instrument, or they can leave a little note or something like that. So that has helped a lot. Going back from the days of just the handwritten discrepancies, that was kind of horrible. We've graduated well past that now.
With big data and AI coming into the place, where do you think predictive maintenance is going to get now that we have this capability of taking big data sets and then correlating them to historical data? I guess the big question is, one, do we have a data set of maintenance that we can track that, hey, this G4 at this many hours did this, right? And then is there the capability in that AI space, and I'll phrase it to you first, can we start to use AI in these machine learnings to take these data sets to provide better predictive maintenance from, one, getting in front of issues, but two, maybe providing, because my big issue with building budgets is I'll send an airplane out to 10 operators and I'll get 10 completely different budgets, and it's all different from the maintenance standpoint. Do you think we're going to be able to get to a point where we can predict maintenance a lot better than we can now? and at a more accurate cost standpoint?
I do. I think what we've done up until this point is a lot of tribal knowledge. So we're at a pivotal point in the industry where for the last 5 years, what we've talked about are the aging workforce that's starting to exit quicker and quicker, and we're bringing a younger workforce in. Where we're really going to see the benefits of AI, especially on the maintenance side of the house, is that tribal knowledge we're able to capture and generate the actions quicker. So that several companies have announced that they're starting to build platforms that take all that data and merge it together. So instead of having to try and find the right person that has it, MROs are going to have those resources that say, we've worked on enough Hawker aircraft or enough Falcons that this is a historical option. We know it, we see it. You can in turn pass that information along to the customers or the operators and the owners and say, this is an expectation. I would plan on this. It's a high probability that during your C-check, this is what we uncover. This is a lot of manual work from now. We've got databases that are, honestly, they're Excel spreadsheets from the past that say, I've done enough of these airplanes that, I've got the low, medium, and high for what an inspection could cost. And it's literally an average that these directors of maintenance are going in and telling their owners, here's what I expect. We'll be able to hone that down and give you a pretty high percentage of the variable of what it's going to be for your model, the hours flown, and the age.
That's awesome. Rob, as operators grow, what would be some of the things that you would tell them to keep their discipline from a safety, but also, from a safety ecosystem, but also when you're considering maintenance and pilots? How do you tell someone as they're growing and scaling to keep that culture or safety mindset alive?
Is that for me, Dan?
Yeah. Yeah, because it's easier to do when you've got 4 airplanes.
Yeah.
But when you go from 4 to 10 to 30, and I'll throw it back to Rob after you because he saw that. But from your standpoint, how do you, as you scale, how do you keep that ingrained in that growth? Because you lose, as you grow, you lose a lot from a culture and growth standpoint, right?
So one of the 4 pillars of SMS is promotion, right? So you have to be consistent with promoting what your system is. You have to be consistent in your training. You have to be consistent in the messaging. It has to be driven from the top down, but also improved from the bottom up, from the front line who are fixing the airplanes, flying the airplanes. Management doesn't do that. Top management doesn't do that. They don't see the issues. So it's a both and situation, and you have to be on top of it. Because if you just put it out there when you're 3 or 4 airplanes and you think that's going to be it, when you're 30 or 40 airplanes, you've missed the plot totally.
Yeah.
So it has to be this constant, ongoing, probably in my opinion, the biggest task for leadership is to keep that encouragement, keep you at the forefront of everyone being on the same page with the relevant tools that are appropriate for where you are today and where you're going tomorrow, not where you were last year or 5 years ago. So for me, in safety leadership, that's a key point for me. You have to keep driving that message and hearing from the front line what needs to be changed. So, yeah.
Rob, for you, you've seen growth within an operation. What have you seen worked to keeping that safety culture? And then maybe what are some of the things you would suggest that maybe hasn't worked that you would tell a smaller operator as they're growing to look out for?
Yeah, I would say don't underestimate it and don't wait. Get ahead of it. And scale the culture when you're scaling the airplanes, if not before. Because every time for us, every time we were adding airplanes, we were adding people, and then you're in you lose a little culture every time you add people because you're bringing new people in, and you got to train those people, and they got to go through SMS training, and you got to bring them in, and you got to get their buy-in to the whole system, and then go from there. And for me, it was always, when we went from 10 to 12 to 14 airplanes, I was always trying to stay ahead of the growth, and I was thinking 18 when we were at 14. I was thinking 22 when we were at 18, and then so I was always building the department. 30 airplanes when we had 24, and trying to stay ahead of it and getting the people that I needed, the equipment that I needed, the training that I needed, and trying to keep the culture ahead of where we were, and so to speak, so that you were ready for it when it did happen. Because when it happens, it's fast. And we would get sometimes 2 or 3 airplanes at once within a month or so, which is a lot for us to absorb, and all the people that would come with it. And the increased maintenance, the increased charter flights, the increased everything, hangar space, all the whole, from start to finish. So just anticipating, and I think it's the jobs of us in leadership roles is to constantly be looking ahead. Yeah. At the same time, you're dealing with the president and the president, what's going on right then, but constantly, okay, someday we're going to be at 28 airplanes. That someday could actually be tomorrow. Yeah. You never know when. Somebody like Jack's going to walk up and say, "Here's 5 more airplanes." Yeah, that could happen.
Could happen.
It could happen. So, staying ahead of it and preparing for it. And my department's always been bigger than the airplanes that I have right now. If you walked into my department right now, we're prepared to manage and maintain 30 airplanes. We don't have 30 airplanes right now, but we could.
Yeah, from a systems and standpoint.
The systems and
so Dan, that goes back to an earlier point of think bigger than you are. Right? Yeah. Think and act down the road. Don't settle for where you are. Yeah.
Michael, what about you? What would you tell a small operator that's trying to scale how to set up their systems, their operation to handle the maintenance that they're hoping to have when they think bigger?
There's a lot of experience still floating around the industry. I've seen a lot of, I mentioned COVID, but after COVID, there were a lot of people that stepped into private aviation that had never been in it before, and they jumped into it feet first. And they quickly learned it was eye-opening, and they exited quickly. But I would align yourself with a good industry veteran, a consultant, somebody that can help you, guide you through that process. It's going to because you can really get upside down really quickly. Yeah. You've got to have, exactly to your point, you've got to have the procedures, you got to have the process. There's things that can be gotchas, the tooling, the training. These are very expensive. Insurance, just all the different things that you don't factor in, as opposed to subleasing a hangar and parking an airplane in it and paying, an FBO a certain fixed price each month. There's a lot of costs that go into this, and it's very eye-opening for new operators and owners. So do your diligence.
Bring that airplane into an ecosystem.
Correct.
Like a fly house that is there to support those operators for growth, not only just from a maintenance standpoint, but from a safety standpoint, and think big. And I think that's probably a good way to end our session here, is that as these operators grow and scale, as we see more demand coming to, which we're predicted to, which we have over the last year, we'll see more airplanes, we'll see more scaling of this. More people will start 135s, start 145s, to continue to think big and then bring culture, safety culture into it as that thread of the company. I want to thank you all for joining me here. It's been really interesting. I don't think it gets talked about enough within our circles of the not only safety, but really how big of a part that maintenance has a part of the safety. So I want to thank you all for joining me again, and I hope to talk to you next year about how better culture we've built in the industry. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.